first started doing knitwear kind of maybe 8 years ago, but it was just for fun and I was buying in all the materials. Originally I started doing hand knitting and then I started selling the hand knits. Then when the hand knits started going really well, I started producing machine knitted things, and that's when I started to feel really disconnected from it. Became more like a business venture rather than something that I actually enjoyed or cared about. I think when I moved out here, I saw it as an opportunity to reconnect, because obviously living in Derbyshire is full of sheep and wildlife and plant vegetation, etc. So when I put together my proposal, my research project, it became quite obvious that I wanted to kind of start working from scratch. So the project is a site-specific project where I'm going to create 3 garments from around my home in Wirksworth. All the materials are from that one place. When I first worked, I always bought the wool in. And this is the first time I've actually started from scratch, so from finding the materials to processing them all the way through to finishing a garment. Again, the materials I was using previously I had absolutely no interest in. And when you smelt them, they didn't smell of anything. They just smelt like, what had been processed in. They didn't smell like a sheep. The experience of making the material is as important as using the material to turn it into a garment. Something I wasn't really expecting, and how much I was going to enjoy kind of the spinning and the dyeing and all the other elements within that. I was really surprised by how laborious the process is. I mean, yeah, it takes a long time to card wool, and it's quite physically tiring. It really hurts your wrists, etc. So you card it into rolags, which are like little tubes basically, and then you can spin from those. But again, even the spinning process is incredibly time consuming. So, you'll spin a single ply wool onto a spool, and you'll spin another single ply wool onto another spool, and then you'll ply it into a 2-ply. And then when that's done, you kind of put it onto a niddy noddy, which is just a contraption to make a hank essentially. And once you've made the hank, you have to wash it again to get the remaining lanolin out basically. And then once you've washed it again, you hang it up, dry it, roll it into a ball, and then you can knit with it. So having missed all of those processes out in kind of previous experiences, I think it probably takes 10 times longer to produce a hank of wool than it does to knit it. I decided that I wanted to use some dyes to add some more processes to it and to get a better understanding of the material again. So I decided that what I wanted to do is just gather dye plants from around here. So I think we got blackberries from down the lane, and the oranges from kind of a fungus growing a tree that was down the lane as well, and the tansy just from up the hill. I now have to pay much more attention to the landscape because things are taking so long to create. So to create one kind of hank of yarn takes so long that by the time I've done it, the dye plants that I might have wanted to use have kind of run over. So I think a lot of it is to do with dyeing that's kind of made me more aware of nature and the landscape around me. I made the wool first, basically, made the hanks of wool, and then I'd look at them and decide how I could turn that into a design. But I was very conscious that it had to be something that wouldn't resemble something from Fair Isle, etc. So I used things like slip stitch, which is, they used to use it a lot in the 70s, but if you don't use it in kind of garish colours, then it doesn't look 70s anymore. For the farm jumper especially, because of the colours I'd got, so there's like yellows and oranges and pinks, and then the grey and the white, kind of trying to think of something that would resemble this place. And because of the aspect of the valley, you get the most amazing sunsets here. It made it much more a response to the place rather than, right, I'm going to make a Fair Isle jumper with these colours. It was more, okay, right, so what can I do with what I've gleaned from the surrounding landscapes? The other thing that I learnt was how to make buttons. I didn't want to buy in buttons or make them from somewhere else, so I got given the horns of the sheep from Breamfield where the waistcoat is made. So we did a bit of research and turned those into buttons so that garment is 100% site specific. it's just trying to make things a bit more authentic again, rather than trying to take other people's traditions and transplant them somewhere. It's starting from where you are and just working with what you can supply yourself. Each artefact came from a very specific site, and they took kind of varying amounts of time, and other people have helped within them as well. So it's been an interesting way of being able to compare particular garments against each other and trying to work out what it is that as a craftsperson is interesting, and why we are attached to certain things and why we're not attached to certain things. I think generally throughout the process I've realised that I'm much more attached to the garments that I'm making than when I was working previously with kind of bought in materials. The main thing is the memory attached to each one as well, because I have friends here and lots of memories relating to this place. The farm jumper that I'd made, that's probably the one that I'm most attached to. You know, when I look at it, I do remember, you know, gathering kind of blackberries and tansy with friends, and I remember the time spent spinning it, and I remember a lot of it was exploring around here, looking for things, and how it helped me to get to know this place much better. And I think, yeah, when I walk around wearing it, it does feel like it feels like an authentic experience wearing it even. And then again, the one that I've made from the Hebridean fleeces at Breamfield, it's so close to home that, you know, when you're walking through Wirksworth, if you look up, you can always see the sheep on the hillside. So it's an interesting way of being able to compare what it is that makes craftspeople attached to things, and how you build connections between craftsperson material and then craftsperson and place as well. And I think the main experience that I found, well, one of them, which I wasn't expecting, was the importance of the community to actually help in producing them. I think if I hadn't had the assistance of the local people around here, then I'd have really struggled to make things. And I think that is something that I found really interesting, because again, it relates to kind of rural and vernacular crafts, where that sense of community would have been really important and intrinsic to their lives here. So I think that is something that I've really enjoyed. But again, the sense of material that I've kind of got a grasp of now, I really understand wool, whereas before I had no understanding of wool whatsoever. And you know, I can get a fleece from a breed of sheep, and then I can get another fleece from the same flock of sheep, even from the same breed, and it's completely different, and it needs processing differently, and I kind of understand that now. So I think I've learned a lot more about my craft. I think it's the emotional connection to garments and objects, which is why there's still craftspeople today, because, you know, pretty much anything that a craftsperson makes now we can make commercially, and we can mass produce, you know, with a few rare exceptions. So, you know, it's a way of understanding why craftspeople still exist.